keep it live, cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage, and I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares, nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change, and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host, Nick Bernabe, here on UCY.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Thank you all for joining me again, and I'm really happy to be back. Once again, I'm alive and well, broadcasting here from San Diego, California. And the police violence crisis has struck close to home this time. We've been reporting on this crisis of police brutality, police killings, and just trigger-happy militarized police pretty much relentlessly since we started broadcasting this show here on UCY. And, for the most part, we're always commenting on things going on around the country, whether from Ferguson to Baltimore to just recently in North Carolina. And, now a tragedy has struck home. A guy was gunned down here in El Cajon, which is probably about a 20-minute drive from here. I don't know, 15 miles away or so. It's in the same county that I'm in. And, people around here are really on edge. And it's, again, another polarizing issue here. But, I mean, just to lay out the story, and I've been getting, being that I'm pretty involved in the activist community, I'm getting a lot of the on from the ground reporting, and we may get some people calling in tonight from the ground as well. I'm not sure. I put out a couple requests. The protests are ongoing. I don't know if they're going to have time to call in. If they do, I mean, there's probably going to be a bunch of background noise, so I'm not sure how well we're going to be able to hear them. I was thinking of going down there myself tonight, but I just figured it'd be a little too hectic and ran out of time and all that good stuff. But basically from what I've been able to gather from the raw footage is a woman who appears to be a refugee or immigrant from Africa called 911 several times to get help for her brother. There's been several conflicting reports whether he had a seizure or not. What we do know for sure is that he was suffering from some kind of mental illness that had gone untreated because he wasn't on any medications. And she was kind of distraught, but she was like yelling and screaming at the cops saying, "I've called you guys 3 times and you didn't show up." So apparently it seemed like she was calling several times to get help for her brother because he was suffering some kind of medical situation. And, she said no one ever showed up, but then, the guy was out wandering through traffic. He wasn't a threat or anything, but people were just saying he was, what's the word for it, distraught or something. He was just kind of wandering through traffic. Someone called the cops. Cops show up. They surround the guy pretty much, and they, guns drawn, and the guy is like panicking. Who knows what kind of mental emergency or health emergency he was dealing with at the time. Long story short, the guy had his hand in his pocket. The cops told him to take his hand out. He took his hand out. He had something in his hand which was not a gun or a knife. And they shot him and tased him at the same time. So, and he went to the hospital. He died overnight, and now there's protests going on here in San Diego. That, long story short, that's what's going on. We may get some callers in to tell us a little bit more in depth. But this is just more of this relentless police brutality issue that just doesn't go away, and it continues to be, the way it's reported in the media, it continues to be a polarizing issue of white versus black and that kind of thing. When of course, a lot of these police killings are at least in part motivated by racial discrimination and stuff like that. But the problem here is that it's really polarizing the country on a racial basis, and it's causing more and more of this tension and divisiveness that is really reminiscent of the Republican and Democrat paradigm. It's really, the media is really shifting it into this white versus black thing, and I think that most people understand that we're not dealing with a white versus black issue. I think what people understand is that we're dealing with an institutional racism issue here, where black people in the United States have been historically oppressed in this country, whether we look back to slavery or then after slavery was abolished, segregation. After segregation was abolished, segregation just continued. In fact, you can make the argument that segregation is actually worse today than it's ever been. I mean, even when it was like the law back in the day, it's worse now. And in cities in the north, I mean, in the Northeast, Chicago, New York, Boston, places like that. I mean, these cities are the most segregated cities. The South isn't even as segregated anymore as it is in the North, and so. This issue is still going on, and then the other issue here is just the poor education that goes on in inner cities and in poor neighborhoods and in black schools that really perpetuates this cycle of poverty, which leads to communities where there's a lot of violence and a lot of bad situations, and then that leads to this kind of reactionary policing, the broken windows policing, where they go in and they just try to arrest people and pull people over and search people for just the most minimal infractions, and just basically stop and frisk on a grand basis. I mean, Trump's wet dream, that's what's already going on for the most part in the United States. People get pulled over all the time and searched and detained for practically no reason. So it's an ongoing issue, and this adding this militarization of the police into the equation, it just throws a match into an existing tinder pit. I don't know how to describe it. The words aren't coming to me right now, but that's what's going on here, and it's going to continue to get worse. And as the government continues to grow, and education continues to go south, and inequality continues to go north, and all these bad factors continue to combine with each other, it's really creating this nasty cocktail that's really going to be ripe for an explosion sometime really, really soon. And these little riots going on in Charlotte and then in Ferguson and Baltimore, I think these are just little previews of what is in store for us soon down the line, as these kind of factors continue to make each other worse and continue to compound each other and make the problem worse and worse and worse. And sooner or later, it's going to really blow up in our faces, and then we're going to be dealing with a situation where we're really going to have some soul searching, I guess you could say. I mean, that term is used much too often by the government. Whenever something happens that's a tragedy, it's all about soul searching. But no, for real this time, there's going to be some legitimate soul searching when this situation really blows up in our faces. And who knows what is going to happen? I mean, who knows how bad it's going to be or how messed up it is? I mean, looking back, the last time we've maybe seen something on this scale is the Rodney King riots, which was much, much bigger than what went on in Ferguson and what went on in Baltimore, what went on in Charlotte. That's nothing compared to what went on in the Rodney King riots. I mean, we're talking about a city of, upward of 10 million people, and the whole city is going up in riots, and that kind of thing we haven't seen anything like that happen in a long time. And in fact, there's been a lot of measures that have been taken since the Rodney King riots to kind of stop that from happening. And one thing is kind of the pop culture and the co-opting of hip-hop music, which back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, was very much anti-establishment kind of activist music that was, everyone remembers the NWA song, Fuck the Police, right? I mean, this was very early 90s music. And then after the Rodney King riots, I mean, the hip-hop was co-opted in many, many ways and turned into what it's become now, which is this kind of materialistic, superficial, money, hoes, and clothes type of music. And that was part of what they did by design to diffuse this anger that was building in the black communities and stuff, and very legitimate anger, I should mention, because, the African American community in the United States has been getting the short end of the stick for a very, very, very long time. 400 years we're talking about, and people say, oh well, segregation is over, slavery is over, we elected our first black president, the racism is gone. I mean, that's not the case. You don't recover from 400 years of oppression, just by passing a law or abolishing a law or saying, okay, we're doing away with slavery. You don't recover from that kind of oppression overnight. And so people need to understand that there's this systematic oppression that's been going on for so long, and the remnants are still there. They won't be gone for generations from now. And, until we start legitimately understanding and legitimately, addressing this issue, it's not going to get fixed anytime soon unless there's some kind of radical change in the way that we're thinking. And so that's my take on it, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about it as I introduce my panel here. We're being joined now by my longtime co-host DB Schwartz. What's up, man? DB's been having some connectivity issues. I'm not sure if he's able to hear us. I don't hear him.
Can you hear me at all?
All right, there. We hear you now, man. I
think it may break up, though. Yeah.
But
yeah.
Anyway, man, what's your take? You're familiar with you lived in San Diego most of your life. I mean, what's your take on this situation going down here in El Cajon? DB, we can't hear you, man. All right, we're gonna have to see if DB can get reconnected. Something's going on with his connection here. Also joining me tonight is one of our awesome journalists on the antimedia.org, Jake Anderson. What's up, Jake?
Not much, Nick. It's very flattering to call me awesome.
Awesome, amazing, infamous is the one I like the most.
Well, that's significantly different than awesome, but I'll take it.
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
Have you been seeing what's been going on in San Diego, and then how long could you possibly...
No, I'm actually woefully unaware of what happened in San Diego.
Imagine that would happen in a city of that kind of military importance.
Hey, you cut out for a little while there, DB. What did you say after you asked me if I saw what was happening in San Diego?
DB's having some serious connectivity issues. I'm not sure. We're going to have to try to get him back on, but we can't really hear what he's saying, so he's going to...
Nick, could you briefly summarize what did happen in San Diego? I didn't even know about this.
Yeah, I mean, this guy got gunned down by the cops in the street, and of course, it's the same old story, man. It's the witnesses tell you one story, and I mean, the witnesses that I saw seemed pretty credible. They weren't all emotional or anything, and they were pretty level-headed, and they were like, this guy was in the street, he had his hands out to the side of him, and the cops were giving him orders, he wasn't complying, and then he went to go run off, and they shot him. That's what that's what the witnesses say. The cops say that he had his hand in his pocket. They told him to take his hand out. He pulled his hand out. He had something in his hand, and they shot him. Now, upon investigation, there was no weapon found on the scene. And the reason the cops were called out to begin with was, first of all, the dude's brother, or sorry, the dude's sister, called the cops 3 times, so she says, or called 911 3 times to try to get medical attention for this guy because he was dealing with some kind of medical emergency. The guy was known to have mental illness, and we don't know what it is that he was suffering from, but he had some kind of mental condition. And the cops finally came out when people called the cops on him because he was wandering through traffic. So the cops showed up and they kind of pulled out the guns on him and were telling him to do stuff. He didn't comply, and then they shot him 5 times and they tased him at the same time, which was the crazy thing. I mean, one of the cops had the sense to tase the guy. Meanwhile, the other cop just shot the guy. And so it really, really sad story. The guy went to the hospital and then he died overnight. And now there's ongoing protests. They started at like 9 a.m. this morning, and they're still going on right now as we speak. I was just watching a live feed before the radio show started. But Jake, I mean, this is pretty much, just another case in this kind of what's become a predictable cycle of people being gunned down by the cops, right?
Yeah, well, here's what occurs to me. Obviously, we have deep systemic racism issues going on that might not ever be resolved, but, I mean, certainly it's going to take generations and generations of, interpersonal healing and all kinds of stuff. But just just looking at it from, an objective standpoint as much as I can, I don't understand how we can be spending trillions and trillions of dollars on a military-industrial complex, and yet we don't, and we're militarizing the police, yet somehow we don't have the technology to supply these cops with a way to disarm or stop someone without killing them. It's incomprehensible. And you mentioned that someone used a taser for a second. That's what happened in the case, the other case that happened recently too. Why are they not using taser? Why is that not the go-to thing? I mean, it does not make sense that we don't have the technological ability to do whatever it is the cops want to do, whether it's rightfully detain them or not. They should not be getting killed.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right, and the cops, and I've seen cops around here before. There was some kind of dispute on the old street I used to live on. I don't know what it was, but one time when I was probably in high school, I came outside and these cops are coming down my street, and one of them had like this thing that looked like a paintball gun. And it was like, from what I could tell, it was a paintball gun, and the paintballs were filled with like pepper spray type of stuff. And they were going to use that to disable a suspect or to, try to detain somebody or whatever. There's, like you said, we spend trillions of dollars, man. I mean, we literally just signed a military aid package to Israel worth something like $38 billion over the next 10 years, the biggest aid package we've ever spent. So we could afford to send $38 billion over to Israel. We could afford to spend $5 trillion fighting the war on terror, but we can't figure out how to supply our cops with technology to not kill our own
crazy
people. I mean, to be really cynical about it, it's almost like they want to kill people.
No, there's no other way to interpret. And Chris Hedges wrote a piece recently about how the police killings will not stop, and he straight up ended the final sentence of this little piece was the entire purpose of what's going on is to make it so that the state can kill with impunity, whether it's domestically or internationally. And it seems like, we don't want to think of our government as a legion of psychopathic killers, but it really seems like that's what is going on here, because there's just no other explanation for why they could be killing with such impunity, and why none of these cops are ever caught or arrested. You know, if there's supposedly these good cops out there, and I'm sure there are, maybe, I guess, I mean, why are we not seeing footage of them arresting the bad cops? Like, where is the policing of the police going on here? They better figure it out, because shit's about to get really insane really quick, and if they don't start policing themselves, they're going to have straight up riots on their hands pretty soon.
Legitimate riots, man. We're not talking about little neighborhood riots. I mean, that's, you know, if a riot pops off tonight in San Diego, in El Cajon, El Cajon's not a huge city, man. It's probably got, you know, 100,000 people that live in it. It's not a big city by any means. I mean, it's a suburb. It's not a suburb. It's a, you know, it's a community of San Diego County. It's not the main city. It's not anything like that. I mean, we're not, what we've been seeing recently with these police killings, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, in Ferguson, in Baltimore, in all these places where there's been riots recently, these are like towns. You know, these are, you know, Baltimore's a big city, but, you know, these aren't giant scale riots like we saw after the Rodney King, you know, shooting, or the Rodney King beating. Sorry, that was a wide scale riot. That was the entire city of Los Angeles going up in flames, and that was something much, much bigger. And that's what we're about to start seeing if they continue, if the cops continue killing people with impunity. You know, and that's what's going to start happening. And it's not something that anybody should be looking forward to. This is something very, very bad and very, very dangerous. And you know, the cops have shown no initiative on the reform side of things. The Obama administration briefly pretended it was going to reform the militarization of police, but that all got undone after the Dallas when the guy shot up the Dallas cops. I mean, all of that stuff got thrown out the window, and you know, the situation from here seems like it's only going to get worse. And you're right, man. Like, when are we going to hold these guys accountable? I see stories all the time where cops get fired or have to resign over like dumb stuff, like little things. Like, there was some cops, I think it was in Arizona, that made a kid eat some weed. They caught him with weed and they made the kid eat it, and the cops got fired. But, you know, on the other hand, a cop guns down somebody and the circumstances are extremely questionable. Like in the case of, oh God, who was the kid up in Cleveland, the young boy that got shot? I can't remember his name. Anyway, you know, little kids get shot with BB guns and the cops get let off, you know, but they make a kid eat weed and it's like, oh, huge deal. Or they post something on social media and it's like, oh, they have to quit or they're going to get fired. You know, and then they kill somebody and it's like not that big of a deal. You know, and so people are only going to be able to take this so much. And sooner or later, you know, as we've mentioned before and as we've covered on the anti-media, I mean, this cycle of police killings is going to lead to a reaction of more and more people killing the cops. And, you know, we're going to see a higher frequency of like police ambushes where people set up a fake emergency where a bunch of cops show up and then it's an ambush and a bunch of cops get killed. And then on the other side, we're going to see cops, when that starts happening more often. I mean, it already started happening in Dallas. As that begins happening more often, the cops are going to be more trigger happy and they're going to be more on edge. Sooner or later, the cops are going to gun down like 4 or 5 people in a group at once. Because they think they see one gun or something, and then a whole group of people get gunned down. At that point, I mean, the entire country is going to be in uproar. It's going to be an open kind of rebellion in the black neighborhoods and stuff like that. And that's what's on the horizon right now. I mean, I could see that happening in the next several months. I could see that definitely happening if Trump is elected really quickly. I could see that happening over the next year if Clinton is elected. I mean, this kind of stuff is guaranteed to happen. It's just a matter of when. And the reason being is because the cops refuse to, and the bureaucrats and the government refuse to reel in the cops and refuse to deal with the militarization and refuse to deal with the training. I mean, look at the training. And when have you seen a story or a video of a guy that does something and the cops shoot him, but they only shoot him to kind of shoot him in the leg or shoot him in the arm to disable him? The cops are shooting to kill people. They shoot someone 5 times in the chest. They're not doing it to put him down and detain him. They're doing it to kill a guy.
And they want us to know that they can do it and get away with it. At the end of the day, they are just sitting there saying, you can't stop us. There's nothing you can do. You can bitch, you can moan, you can cry, you can go on TV, you can have your protests, but we can do what we want and you can't stop us. That seems to be their basic attitude.
Exactly. And the other thing here is that until enough white people come around to this idea that of course police killings are wrong, but also the fact that per capita black men are targeted like 400% more often than anybody else. Until enough white people come around and start uniting with the black movements, and maybe it's Black Lives Matter, maybe it's not Black Lives Matter, but maybe it's some other movement that comes along. And until this becomes an issue that's big enough where it unites people and doesn't divide them, nothing's going to change, man. Because right now, when a white cop guns down a black dude, the people are divided, man. I shit you not. Most of these white conservatives are sitting here making excuses for the cops and saying, well, they should have just followed orders, and they should have just done what they were told if they didn't want to die, type of thing. And on the other end of the spectrum, the Black Lives Matter crowd is just kind of condemning all cops for the acts of these some of these bad cops and stuff. And right now it's just a very divisive issue, and that's another reason why we're not going to see any reform. It's just nothing's going to change as long as the population remains divided on this issue. So, I mean, what's it going to take for the police killings to become an issue that supersedes racial divides and class divides and, all these other factors that right now are being used, the political divide and the gender gap and all this other thing? What's it going to take for this issue of militarization of the police and police brutality to supersede all of these, wedge groups? I mean, what's it going to take?
I don't know. I think I don't really foresee the state changing in its current manifestation. I mean, if we're talking hundreds of years out, I think things are going to change. I mean, eventually humanity is going to have to learn a way to organize itself in a way that doesn't disenfranchise so many people. But for the short term, I just see it getting a lot worse, unfortunately. And it's really a sad thing that there's just so little desire on the part of those in power to make things better. So little reform has gone on in these last 4 years, despite just incredible instances of injustice caught on videotape. They're arrogant, and I guess they're just waiting for they're waiting for it. What we're gonna end up seeing is many people killed at once, and at that point we will now know for sure that we are actually the enemy combatants. Some of us already know that, but I think at that point it will be clear that the citizens of the United States are actually the enemies of the government, because we are the ones who can stop them, and they know that.
Yeah, man, it's a scary prospect, but sooner or later an event will happen. And we always talk about technology being the great equalizer. One possibility is a hacker breaks into some police systems and leaks out a bunch of information that would erase the racial divide on this issue and expose the racism flowing through these police networks for what it is. Now, the problem is with that theory of mine is that this stuff has already happened. I mean, there's been plenty of instances where cops have been busted saying and doing blatantly racist things. And again, it goes back to this idea, well, it's just, you can't judge them all by a few, bad apples. But there was a long time ago. There was a FBI warning about how white supremacist groups were infiltrating local police departments, and that's happened. It happened, and there's a bunch of racists that become police because, well, they want to be able to beat up black people with impunity. I mean, what better way? If you're a racist, what better way to get away with being a racist and doing horrible things to black people and minorities than becoming a cop? I mean, it's a perfect way to do it because then you get impunity and then you can get away with it. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
It really does.
And, that's what's happened, dude, is that a lot of these police departments have been infiltrated by a huge number of white supremacists, KKK people, and they go around beating up and killing black people with impunity, and they, that's what they enjoy doing. They're racist. I don't understand racism. I'm not racist. I don't really know any racists, but whatever it is that they like about being a racist, they enjoy beating up black people, and that's what they're doing, and they become cops to do it. I'm not saying by any means all cops are racist. I'm not saying all cops are bad, but the institution of policing at this point in time in this country, I mean, just look at the drug war and how they've been enforcing this war on cannabis, war on marijuana forever, and I don't know any cops that have refused to nail people for getting caught with weed. I mean, there's been a couple times where I've been messed up. I've been charged by the police for marijuana possession. There's been a couple other times where the cops were looking for something much more serious, and I just happen to be there, and I happen to have weed, and they happen to just say, "All right, dude, like, just whatever, man. Just we're not going to arrest you tonight, and we're not going to give you a ticket, but just get out of here," type of thing. I mean, that's happened as well. But it's an issue that needs to be understood by everybody and not just spearheaded by the black community. And I don't know what it is we need. Maybe we need a new leader or a new group or a new organization that is able to better message or better market this idea of police brutality and to go about reforming it, because right now the entire atmosphere is very polarized and it's just not going anywhere, really. It's just further entrenching people within their own camps, and that's just not going to solve the crisis here. So I mean, it's just really, really sad what's going on. We're gonna have to move on because we got a bunch of other news to cover tonight. So I'm gonna be staying on top of this stuff going on in El Cajon. Like I said, it's right in my backyard, so if something goes on, I'm gonna be on top of it. I haven't covered it yet on the anti-media just because it's been the shooting has been well covered by the mainstream, and even though they're kind of regurgitating police talking points, we don't have any concrete alternative information right now, so I haven't really covered it, but I will be doing that if something comes up tonight or tomorrow, so keep an eye on the anti-media for that. Now, going into kind of on the same topic here with the police stuff, an issue that's a little less polarizing. What's going on with these Native American protests over in North Dakota is that they've actually started spreading, and now there's groups in Iowa that are also blockading the Dakota Access Pipeline. So this thing is, not only is it being stopped by Native Americans over in North Dakota, but now people in Iowa, and it's Native Americans and also a bunch of other just activists and people that are allies of these groups that are trying to stop the pipeline. They're all joining together, and on Saturday, they successfully blocked the construction of the pipeline over in Iowa in a town called Sandusky, where basically the pipeline is they're trying to construct it over top of the Mississippi River. And so a bunch of activists and Native Americans went down there and chained themselves to the construction equipment, and therefore they had to stop the construction down in Iowa. And so this opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline has become kind of viral, and it's spreading all over the place, even though there's kind of a media blackout on this. I covered earlier in the week, I covered a story called about how ABC and NBC have refused to air a single word about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. I mean, to this day, and this thing has grown big. It's gone viral. It's gone mainstream. And ABC and NBC refuse to cover it. Why are they not covering? I mean, there's plenty of speculation there. I mean, these guys are in bed with the oil companies. You would think NBC, being the liberal standard bearer that it is, would be like against oil, and because they love to talk about climate change and stuff, but that's not the case. They talk about climate change, but they don't give a shit about stopping the fossil fuel industry, or they don't give a shit about covering the people that are trying to stop the fossil fuel industry. And so that's what's going on there. But today, I mean, there was a bunch of arrests down on Saturday there was 12 arrests down in Iowa, and then as of up to date, there's been at least 44 arrests in Iowa as these people continuously chain themselves to the construction equipment and try to stop it. Now the other thing is, and here's what really is kind of unsettling is, in North Dakota, the protests haven't stopped, and this is the thing that people may not know. But the Obama administration, the Justice Department issued some type of injunction or some type of order where they overturned they kind of halted the construction there on the Army Corps of Engineering land so they could quote unquote reassess the environmental impact and the social impact with the tribes and stuff like that. But the protests haven't stopped because the Obama administration, the Justice Department issued that statement, and everybody thought that the construction, the pipeline is through, it's not going to be built. That's not the case. They only stopped the construction on the Army Corps of Engineering land. All the other construction continues. Some of this land is Native American sacred lands where they've had like burial sites and other sacred sites. Other parts of this land is stuff that's been taken through eminent domain from ranchers, farmers, and other landowners that happen to be in the path of this pipeline. They didn't want to sell their land. They didn't want to rent their land out to the pipeline. They said no, and the pipeline went to the government and said, hey, use eminent domain, take this land from these people so we can build this pipeline, and the government did. A bunch of people have had their land taken, so there's a bunch of lawsuits going on as well in Iowa, North Dakota, and other states in the area that the pipeline is going through. They're trying to stop the pipeline as well because they don't want their pristine farmland to have oil pipelines on it that could one day leak and destroy their land. So the fight continues, and just earlier today, how many people was it, man? A bunch of people got arrested today in North Dakota. 21 people were arrested, and I got in touch with the Morton County Sheriff's Department, which is the Sheriff's Department that has jurisdiction over there in North Dakota, where the Standing Rock camp is at, which is where all the protesters are camping out, kind of occupying. And I called the Sheriff's Department to get a confirmation because it was reported from a news outlet that 21 people were arrested. And I got in touch with the guy, and first of all, man, this sheriff dude was so condescending. He was like, I called him up. I'm like, hey, I'm a journalist writing a story on the arrest today, and I want to confirm how many people were arrested, why they were arrested. And the guy's like, oh well, first of all, you call yourself a journalist, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're a journalist. What organization are you with? And I'm like, well, I'm with the anti-media. And he was immediately he was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a really good news outlet. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why do you call yourselves the anti-media? I'm like, well, because we cover the news that the mainstream media isn't covering. He's like, well, the mainstream media is covering this. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. ABC and NBC have not even aired a single word about this protest. So anyway, long story short, the guy confirmed that 21 people were arrested today in North Dakota because they were trespassing on the pipeline property. Now, the thing that really stands out to me here, and this is the biggest slap in the face, is to charge a Native American person with trespassing on land that is sacred Native American land that has been somehow acquired by the pipeline. And to arrest these people and charge them with trespassing, to me, it's just like the biggest slap in the face. It's like this land was stolen from these Native American people, and then you're going to sit here and tell them that they can't go on that land. You're going to arrest them for protesting or for trespassing, and just to me, it's just the biggest slap in the face. But that's
Nick,
what's going on.
Nick, can you hear me finally?
Yeah, we got you. What's up, man?
I was just gonna say.
Damn, man, his connection is like really bad today.
He's cutting out, and he'll start talking.
Hey,
and
dude,
it cuts out.
the only way you can really do this and have it stand up in a court of security reasons. So I don't know, man. I mean, maybe there's a way you can stop it
we missed-
somehow along those lines.
DB, you hear me?
Dude, it's breaking up. So I guess I'll just listen.
All right, sorry, we missed like the meat of your argument there. Damn, that sucks. Anyway, we'll have DB back on Monday with a better connection. I don't know what's going on. Every time he goes quiet over there on that end, I always think Hillary's got to him or something. It's like, oh shit, Hillary got to him, or it's the end.
It was Harambe first, now me.
We got Harambe first, and then those reindeer up in Norway, and then now they're trying to go after you, man. It sucks. Anyway, yeah. So keep an eye on the anti-media because we're covering this Dakota Access Pipeline updates. I'm covering it for the anti-media, and I'm writing about it on a weekly basis, a couple of articles a week, or depending if something pops off, I'm going to be covering this a couple stories a day. All depends. So anyway, more news because there's all kinds of news today. It was almost like a news dump day or something, but it's not because it's not Friday. And people keep messaging me on Facebook. Sorry about the background noise there. Anyway, Jake, did you hear about this? Obama went and vetoed the 9/11. I don't know what they're calling it, the 9/11 Justice Bill, where it was going to basically say that people that are victims of state-sponsored terrorist attacks on U.S. soil could actually sue foreign governments to try to get reparations or restitution, whatever you want to call it. And Obama vetoed the bill, and it was just like, it's amazing that Obama would veto it because it's kind of like a no-brainer. It's one of these things where it's like, yeah, you guys, the U.S. government makes the hugest deal out of 9/11 and never forget, and 9/11 is the worst thing. I mean, we've justified a global war for 9/11. And then, this bill comes through Congress, and it's like, hey, we're going to allow people that were victims of 9/11 to sue the people that are responsible for 9/11, and Obama goes and vetoes this thing, and that was big news a couple days ago. But today, Congress overrided Obama's veto for the first time in his presidency. One of his vetoes has been overridden, and so this is big news. And basically, what it does is it's going to pave the way for people because as the other recent development is that the 28-page 9/11 report recently came out. That kind of, in a major way, pointed the finger at Saudi Arabia for being responsible for 9/11 from the funding and planning side of things, and so basically now these people, family members and victims of 9/11, are going to be able to sue Saudi Arabia and anyone else that can be found responsible. Now this is pretty big news because Saudi Arabia already announced that they would retaliate and that they would pull a bunch of money out of the United States, a lot of their investments. One interesting thing that I was looking at over on Bloomberg is the amount of treasury bonds that Saudi Arabia holds in the United States, which now it's a lot of money. I mean, it's not $1 trillion, but it's in the billions. I don't remember the exact number. But I was looking at like the timeline, and it shows that Saudi Arabia, directly after 9/11, started buying huge amounts of United States government debt. And so in an indirect way, the Saudis financed our war against terror. And so, finding out later that the Saudis were mostly the group behind 9/11, if we're going to take what all of this news at face value. It really kind of goes to show that there was somewhat of a false flag carried out here, and Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11, and Iraq got blamed for it, and then Saudi Arabia financed the war against Iraq. And so this is a very, very tangled web of conspiracy and lies, and I guess you could just call them war crimes if you start a war with people for no reason. I guess, to me, that's a war crime, and so this bill is really big, and Saudi Arabia said they were going to pull a bunch of money out of the United States and other type of retaliatory things going on. So I wanted to know what you make of this.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I hear you typing over there.
yeah. Someone on Facebook was just like, I think most of the hate towards Hillary is based on sexism. So I'm about to have a seizure on this post.
I was mentioning about this 9/11 bill and
the 9/11.
the repercussions, man. I mean, what do you think is going to happen now? Because Saudi Arabia has let it openly a couple of months ago let it be known that they're going to retaliate financially if this bill is passed. And as of today, the Obama veto has been overridden, and now this is going to become law.
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, Obama has not done many vetoes, so it's interesting that that's one he chose to veto. I mean, it just shows at the executive level, the government just does not want there to be any kind of firewall against, holding terrorism accountable. They want it to be just this kind of ongoing war that's never actually prosecuted in any kind of way. I don't know with Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's a pretty complex geopolitical situation as far as we're so interconnected with them in terms of oil and whatnot. I don't really see what. I certainly don't know what's going to happen. I mean, long term, as oil comes to an end, basically, this little fake friendship we have with Saudi Arabia is going to come to a screeching halt, and we could see a lot more kind of military, maybe not even just sanctions with them. I mean, we could just see straight up military action. But who knows? Here's a country that we basically support, even though at the higher levels, they are incredibly misogynistic, anti-homosexual ideologies, and yet for some reason, we don't view them as too extreme to support with arms to Yemen and whatnot. I don't know what the hell. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Saudi Arabia. I certainly don't know why this is being thrown out as this weird little piece of red meat as far as 9/11 truth, because I don't really think anyone thinks that we've gotten to the bottom of what really happened on that day.
Yeah, it is really, really complex and so secretive, our relationship with Saudis, and it goes back to, really deep ties under the Nixon administration with the creation of the petrodollar, in the early 70s and stuff, and Saudi Arabia was an integral part of that. And for a long time, they've been like our attack dog in the Middle East. I mean, looking at Bin Laden and his role against the Soviets in Afghanistan. I mean, really, you can look back to the U.S. Saudi partnership and what they did in Afghanistan with Bin Laden as to part of the reason why the Soviet Union collapsed. And so we've had really deep ties with them for a really long time. And so what they do now is really they carry out our dirty work over in the Middle East, whether it's trying to knock out the Syrian government, or trying to destabilize Iraq and take out Saddam Hussein, or whether it's toppling the Libyan regime of Muammar Gaddafi. The Saudis really do a lot of that dirty work for us, and we do it by proxy. We give them arms, they arm the people that we want them to arm. So that way it's not like, oh, the U.S. is not arming directly Al-Qaeda or directly arming ISIS in its early days. It's Saudi Arabia. We don't know what they're doing with the weaponry. We give it to them, and we can't really control it per se, but, it happens to wind up in the hands of ISIS, and then ISIS is supposed to go and destabilize the Syrian government, and we all see how that's played out. It's turned into a huge mess, and it's turned into a protracted civil war that has cost the lives of nearly 500,000 innocent Syrians and, displaced another 10 million, created the refugee crisis, created this hyper-nationalism threat spreading through Europe, created Trump. I mean, all these side effects going on from these bad, poorly thought out or poorly planned policies, whatever it is. But here's the thing, and I've noticed over the past year and a half, 2 years, I've been covering the news very closely for a long time. And for the longest time, Saudi Arabia got a complete pass. I mean, following 9/11, the Saudis were never mentioned as in any negative light in the media or from politicians. I mean, George Bush is pictured walking, holding hands with the goddamn Saudi Arabian king, for God's sake, right? And so never was there any kind of criticism of Saudi Arabia coming from the U.S. establishment. But that changed as of 2 years ago. And one thing that I'd like to bring up economically that may be kind of relating to that is it was only, 2 years ago when the United States became the largest producer of oil. For a long time, we weren't the largest producer. It was, Saudi Arabia had always been one of the largest producers. And so the United States displaced everyone else when it came to oil because of our fracking industry and technology and that kind of stuff. And ever since we became the leading oil producer, Saudi Arabia has been getting thrown under the bus. Started off with the media, then the politicians. Now even Trump is allowed to talk about Saudi Arabia in a negative light sometimes, even though the Saudis bailed him out. I mean, we see how the Saudis have a close relationship with Hillary Clinton. So, if she gets elected, I'd expect our ties with Saudi Arabia to go back to normal. But as of right now, I mean, the ties with Saudi Arabia, even though we're still selling them billions in arms and stuff, the ties have become pretty sensitive, and they're on edge. And we just sent them a bunch of weapons and stuff, but they've openly stated that this law is not okay. And for Congress to go and override Obama's veto on this, and look at the numbers. In the Senate, I think it was like 97-1. 97 senators said, "Yeah, we're going to overdo this veto," and only one person, voted against it. And so that tells you that the Saudi lobby and the neoconservatives that have been so close to Saudi Arabia for so long, they've lost their grip on Congress. And so if Congress loses the support of Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia loses the support of Congress, the next step is the executive branch. And now we see Obama try to veto it, so Obama's still kind of trying to pander to the Saudis. And of course, if Clinton gets elected, she's going to pander to the Saudis. But, if the legislation loses its allegiance to Saudi Arabia, the executive branch is next. And so what I'm foreseeing here is a major shakeup in our alliances in the Middle East, being that Saudi Arabia is our main alliance outside of Israel. Saudi Arabia is like our biggest partner when it comes to oil and arms and the defense industry, intelligence sharing, and especially in the geopolitical platform, all of the, like I said, all of the financing that Saudi Arabia gives covertly to terror groups and other groups that we want to, carry out our mission over there geopolitically in the Middle East. All of that could come into question over the next couple of years because it definitely seems like our relationship with Saudi Arabia is coming apart. And so that's going to lead to some very interesting realignments in the Middle East. I mean, Iran is definitely the the rising player out there, and who knows how this is going to play out. There was just today on the oil front, OPEC, which is the oil producing something nations. It's an alliance of oil nations. It includes Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, a couple other countries out there that make a bunch of the oil. They agreed today to cut output or to freeze output of oil. and oil prices just skyrocketed today. And one of the reasons being was that Saudi Arabia was unable to, it was going into debt for the first time because the oil prices were too low. And, this oil production, I think, was designed to, in one aspect, it was designed to destabilize Venezuela. It was also designed to disrupt Iran. It was designed to decimate the economy of Russia. But Saudi Arabia was affected by it too. And I think the U.S. wanted Saudi Arabia to keep the output going, to keep the prices down so they can keep squeezing Venezuela, Iran, and Russia. But that's not happening now. They came to an agreement today between Iran and Saudi Arabia to freeze oil production. And so there's a realignment going on right now geopolitically, and it also coincides with kind of the U.S. losing its grip on its empire, and now the Philippines are trying to kick our military out, and the Philippine president just announced that he wants to maybe start cutting off ties in some ways with the United States and start working more in cooperation with China and Russia. So there's a realignment happening right now, and I think the whole world is kind of seeing the United States losing its grip on its empire. And this happens to every empire. We talked about this last show. This happens to every empire, but there's a realignment going on right now because our economy is kind of slowed down and it's never going to get back to what it once was. Everybody's starting to realize that, and we're going to be going through a bunch of geopolitical changes in the coming couple years that are going to change pretty much everything around the world that we know of from the American perspective. And it's just going to be a whole new world by the time the next president is done with their term. We're going to be looking at a whole new situation. And for better or for worse, it's going to happen. And so I don't know how to really gauge it at this point, because right now the chips aren't down yet. Everything's still up in the air. Syria is I think everyone's waiting to see what ends up happening in Syria, and then that's when, after that is settled, the realignment is going to take place. If the U.S. prevails over there in Syria, then I think it'll renew our alliances with a lot of our partners that are maybe looking at us right now as a little shaky. If Russia, Iran, China, if they prevail in Syria and the Syrian government remains, well, I think that's going to attract a bunch of new partners to the Eastern Bloc, the Russia, China, Syria, Iran, North Korea bloc. The Philippines are already moving in that direction. The BRICS nations, we talked about Brazil, India, South Africa. A lot of these nations are right now looking at what's going on with these competing empires, and they're waiting to see what goes on in Syria before they, decide where they're going to lay their alliances. And so this is one of the reasons why the United States is not wanting to let go of this Syrian civil war, and that's why we keep on funding and arming and training these rebels and dumping weapons in and giving billions and billions of arms to Saudi Arabia so they could dump the weapons in there too. Because the United States can't afford to lose this war, because if they do, all their credibility is going to be gone on the world scene. And so, that's what's at stake here. For Russia, it's a much more of a do-or-die situation. If the Russians allow the Syrian government to fall, I mean, their economy it's pretty much the death blow to their economy, because right now they base most of their productivity on exporting fossil fuels into Europe, and that's partially what this war is all about, is about getting fossil fuels from the Saudi region into Europe instead of getting them from Russia into Europe, and they need to go through Syria to get out of the Middle East, and that's partly what this war is all about. And so that's why these two sides are fiercely fighting and pretending like they're not. The United States is over there pretending like it's not trying to oust the Syrian government, and the Russians are over there pretending like they're fighting terrorism, and we're over there pretending like we're fighting terrorism. But in reality, the true underlying goal is the United States wants to get rid of the Syrian government, the Russians want to keep the Syrian government, and we're both over there pretending to fight terrorism. And so that's really the gist of what's going on. How will it end? I don't know. Depending on the outcome, it's
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the I'ma let 'em know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.